Welcome to another enlightening episode of The Truth About the Plant, the show that takes you on a journey through the world of psychoactive plants and alternative wellness, all while delivering real, actionable insights you crave. I'm your host, Christina Dees, and this is my equally talented co-host, Dr. Amanda Ryman. Dr. Ryman, you want to tell them why we're here?
Absolutely. So we are here because it can be so difficult to get accurate information about cannabis on the internet. Never mind the shadow bans and the blocking of cannabis content. You could Google a perfectly rational question and get 100 different answers, many of which completely contradict each other. So how do you find out the truth? How do you find out the information you need in order to have your best cannabis experience, to learn what you need to know about the plant in order to stay safe? And that's where we come in. So you can think of us as your really cool aunties or your kick-ass granddaughters, the women in your life who will always tell you the truth.
And today we have a special treat for you. Joining us is the one and only Nikka T, a true pioneer in the world of cannabis concentrates. So whether you're a seasoned enthusiast or you're just curious about buzzwords like dabbing, shatter, and wax, Nikka T is here to break it all down. So what's the difference between these potent forms of cannabis? Get ready for a deep dive into the world of concentrates. Nikka T, welcome to the show.
Right on, y'all. Thank you so much for having me. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful intro. And I love what y'all are doing for the space. It's much needed. So thank you.
Yeah, well, if you just give a brief introduction, your background and history, and your name's Nick, but known out there as Nikka T.
Yes. So my name is Nick Tanum, also known as Nikka T. And really that came from my DJ career. Simultaneously as I, walked the path or created some of the path of the cannabis industry, I've also been DJing. So, that's where the Nikka T came from. And really the DJing goes hand in hand with the cannabis culture. I oftentimes find myself not only judging cannabis cups, but also DJing and hosting those cannabis cups. So I spend a lot of my time on the road these days, not only DJing and hosting, but also educating. I'm a teacher and council member with the GA. And I also do a lot of private consulting. I've launched hundreds of hash companies, solventless brands in the space, and consulted for a number of different entities. So I'm blessed to still be here. It's been an interesting road in the cannabis industry over the last 20 years. I've operated everything from licensed laboratories to licensed retail dispensaries to cultivations in the space, and it's been rough, to be completely honest. So I'm really just happy to still be touching the plant and still be following my passionate dreams of educating people on cannabis. And that's really what I do.
Fantastic. Well, we're so thrilled to have you join us because on this program, we talk a lot about flower. We talk a lot about cannabis edibles. And I think I'm pretty knowledgeable about those two product forms, both as a consumer and as a researcher. But I will say I have a blind spot, and that blind spot is cannabis concentrates. So you folks out there may have been to the dispensary, you understand the edibles, you understand the flower. But then you see this whole other line of products, usually coming in these little jars or little boxes known as the cannabis concentrates. And you may have no idea what they are. A lot of people have heard of hash, but as Christina mentioned in the intro, there's all kinds of products out there on the market now that call themselves concentrates, including the oil that you find in vape pens, which are very popular among newer consumers. So, Nikka T, can you break down for us what are cannabis concentrates?
Yes, thank you so much. So concentrates, and that term is really just the umbrella for all concentrated forms of cannabis. And really what that means is we're taking, as extractors or as concentrate makers, we're taking the trichomes. So, in a general term, when you look at cannabis, or a general viewpoint, when you look at cannabis, it has these crystals on it. It has these reflective, disco ball like crystals, and they have a trichome. We call them trichomes. They're a trichome head, a stalk, and that's connected to the plant material. And really where most of the psychoactive components, where the terpenes, where the other volatile compounds are coming from, are within that trichome shell, within that waxy cuticle, within that trichome head, within the crystals, basically. So concentrates are those crystals removed from the plant. And there are numerous ways of concentrating those crystals, or concentrating cannabis to just achieve, those crystals. Multiple forms. Some of them are mechanically separated forms, like dry sifting using a keef screen. And then the other forms of them I would call hydrocarbons, where they're solventlessly, or solvent based extraction. Sorry. So basically, in breaking down concentrates, you have two major categories, and then there's going to be a ton of subcategories underneath there. But in essence, we're extracting or separating. You extract on the hydrocarbon side, and on the mechanical side, we separate. And those are both methods of concentrating cannabis, or basically taking these crystals and creating a consumable form out of them. These concentrates are going to have higher THCA levels, higher THC levels, higher terpene levels, higher volatile compound levels than the flower, because it's the concentrated form. And we know that the flower has most of its psychoactive components within that trichome head, within the crystals, and that's what we're concentrating. So once you break down those different categories, you start to hear terms like rosin. And that would be a mechanical form of extraction first to create water hash, or a water sifted product. And then from there, we would use heat and pressure to actually extrude what's inside that trichome oil, or sorry, what's in that trichome head, to extrude that oil. And that oil is considered rosin on that mechanical side. And then on the hydrocarbon side, people oftentimes use solvents like butane or propane, or even ethanol. And CO2, to me, is considered a solvent-based extraction, something that actually extrudes that oil via solvents.
All right. So that was a lot of information, and a lot of good information, because I think a lot of folks don't even realize that when we talk about concentrates, we're really talking about harvesting those crystals, and that is where most of the psychoactivity, the flavor, the aroma from cannabis is coming from. So we're removing those from the plant, and we're concentrating them into their own material. And I think a lot of people out there have heard of hash. So can you talk a little bit about kind of the simple ways that hash was traditionally made, and how that is different from the way we might see concentrates made today? Because hash making is an extremely old practice. And in a lot of countries outside of the US, it's still the predominant way that people consume cannabis products. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about hash.
Definitely. And, in general, a lot of people now in today's world are considering hash another big umbrella term for all of those different products that I just mentioned. So even butane hash oil might be considered hash to some. But what I think you're describing or talking about is on the mechanical side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, there are two ways to make hash, really, really traditionally. I'm talking over 100 years ago. And those traditions consist of dry sift. And then I'd say more recently, we've gotten into the water sifting, or water hash. And when we're talking about dry sift, I briefly mentioned it earlier. Another term for that is keef. And what we're basically doing is we're taking those trichome heads that are attached to the material, and there's multiple ways to get to this same end product, or a similar end product, but some people are using, more aggressive forms of pushing these trichomes through sieves, and then collecting the different size trichomes in these different size micron sieves.
So if you're out there and you have a grinder, and your grinder has that little compartment underneath.
I have to be honest about that grinder and that
Okay,
compartment, and I
please.
love that you brought it up, because to
Please.
be honest, that grinder and that style was created in the 80s, or prior to that, and it was created for cocaine. It was created for other powder drugs. And
Huh.
so you grind up your drug, and then you get the usable thing on the bottom, because in reality, most of the grinders on the market today that use that same screen technology, you're not going to get much keef in that keef big. There are grinders, though, that it actually does work, that they've created the right size screen, but that size of screen is really important to collect the right size of trichome heads. So yes, there's going to be a fraction of the type of grinders out there that do have a screen that has the right size heads for collecting trichomes, and you will get a crude sift from that. And then there's even different ways to clean up that sift to just have it be the trichome head. There's new ways that are coming to light. They're probably traditional ways that have been around for at least 50 years, but now they're actually starting to be put out there in the world, utilizing static charge to actually separate the stalks of that trichome from the head. And so you're removing the stalks and the rest of the plant material and just separating the head utilizing static charge.
Wow.
So
Okay, so you
that's
talked about sifting.
sifting.
Tell me about the bubble, the water method, because I know that like when you
Yes.
go into the dispensary, you'll see something like bubble hash or cold
Bubble
water.
hash, yes.
Yeah.
Bubble hash is a really common term. Cold water hash as well. Water hash, water sift. So I'd say more getting into the 1990s is when water hash really started to come to market. There was a gentleman named Reinhard Delp to really get into the specifics. He held a public class, is how I understand it. And a lot of people attended that public class. People like Mila Jansen, people like Mark Bubbleman. As far as I, am told, these people attended that class. They learned of this method from Reinhard Delp, and then they went back to their various, areas to create equipment to help this method. And this method basically, in essence, is utilizing ice and water to create a cold slurry, first and foremost. Then you add your ideally fresh frozen whole plant material, but traditionally more dry material is added to this water and ice slurry. And because we're keeping really sub temperatures, we're able to just break off that trichome head, agitating that ice water slurry with the material inside. And after we've broken off that head, now we have a hash, slurry, but there are multiple size heads in that hash water material and ice slurry. And to separate those multiple size heads and therefore multiple qualities, we utilize micron bags. And there's new technology starting to use stainless steel screens, but I'd say for the last 20, 30 years at least, maybe 40, we've been utilizing mesh bags, nylon or polyester or silk
Interesting.
bags that have
So,
micron-sized holes. And micron is a unit of measurement to,
okay.
describe the size of the hole that lets in the size of trichome head
Okay, so we've
or
got
holds it.
kind of the mechanical agitation and water methods. We have the chemical extraction methods. Can you tell us a little bit about how these products are consumed? Because back when I was coming up and you were able to get your hands on some hash or some keef, you would just put it on top of your flour in your bowl and smoke it on top. And it was
Yep.
just like a little added boost of THC. Now, of course, we have dabbing and we have vape pens and we have all kinds of different ways to consume. So if someone's out there and they want to try concentrate, let's say they want to try some rosin or they want to try some hash, how are they going to consume it?
So multiple ways to consume multiple types of products. So you were talking about putting some water hash or bubble hash or even probably keef on top of a bowl as a little extra. That's still totally doable. And you can purchase that type of product at most local dispensaries. Ask for water hash, ask for bubble hash, ask for keef, ask for dry sift. Dry sift might be harder. You might not find that too easily. And you can put that on top of a bowl. You can also take those same products and put them in a joint, or a spliff, or a blunt, um, whatever your method may be. They even are making, flower vaporizers that also have concentrate attachments. But I'd say most people that are utilizing concentrates these days are utilizing electronic mobile rigs, which I'll get into. And they're also utilizing dab rigs, which is more, an at-home thing. People travel with them. But rigs, basically it started with a glass piece generally the glass blower community has been a huge reason why concentrates have grown as they have, because the glass blowers have stayed up on the technology and creating these different things for us concentrate makers, that we go to the glass blower and we're like, hey, we made something new, but we don't know how to use it. So the same thing, that you guys are asking is, how do we use these concentrates? So most of the concentrates that people are dabbing on these electronic mobile devices or these dab rigs are rosin. Some people are dabbing water hash, but it has to be really, really high grade, high quality. If it's not full melt, if it's not 6-star, if it doesn't melt really well, you're better suited to use those type of products in a joint or on top of a bowl, on your bong bowl, whatever it may be. But if it's super, super clean, and it's labeled as such, you can also utilize those type of products, even dry sift products, if it's really clean, in a dab rig or a mobile electronic device. And what are these devices? How do you use them? Initially, I think one of the first products that came out was a titanium swing, and maybe there was even something before that. But basically, you're thinking back to the knife hit days, if people are familiar with knife hits,
Oh, yeah.
because that's utilizing heat to vaporize a concentrate and then utilizing some type of hose or funnel system to get that vapor or smoke, probably a combination, into your lungs, right? So we're going on that methodology. And one of the first things that people developed, I think it was Hashmaster Cut, if I'm not wrong. So respect to the people that have created these technologies and these pieces of equipment, really. Tool that really came out was this titanium swing. I actually have one in the glass case back here, relics at this point, but it was a piece of titanium, had a little bit of a curve to it, and you could heat it up with a torch and put your dab, whether that had been made with butane or whether it was rosin or whatever the product was. Back then, when these came out, it was really just water hash and butane hash oil in its various forms. But you heat it up with the torch and you tap the dab to it and you vaporize it and you suck it up through some type of generally we had these horns or these like umbrella like features on top of this swing that connected to a dab rig or a bubbler or a mini bong in essence, and you can consume or vaporize in that manner. And that progressed to titanium nails and then quartz nails. And now people are utilizing quartz slurpers and quartz bangers. And these are all just terms for different shapes of quartz products. And, people probably in different parts of the world are still utilizing borosilicate, but quartz has been kind of the standard in dabbing. And ceramic is also a really nice standard for atomizers in those cartridges that you mentioned earlier. Also atomizers in those electronic dab rigs. Quartz and ceramic have been great heat conductors, if you will. So you either heat with a torch that ceramic or that glass piece, and you dab the concentrate onto it and vaporize it through water or through a dry rig. And now there's even torchless systems to really get rid of that torch. So as we move along in history, the torch was a little scary for a lot of people. People trying to be introduced to concentrates, the torch might not be too friendly. So I love the fact that the electronic dab rigs, the portable electronic dab rigs, don't utilize a torch. They utilize electronic heating of a atomizer. And then with the dab rigs, you can now also utilize different forms of torchless heaters that will just heat up that banger or that piece of quartz that's already in your rig, and you just remove it from the heater, put your dab in it. People are now utilizing temperature thermometers to make sure that your concentrator, that you're vaporizing that dab at the perfect temperature. And that temperature ranges, I'd say, from like 450 all the way up to people love hot dabs. People that really want to get high. I'd say a hot dab is for those people that just want to get knocked. They're going all the way up to 900 degrees and higher. I have seen higher.
So
So I'd say
basically,
it's a fairly large range for that vaporization. Sorry.
well, the concept though is basically that you're heating the dab of concentrate to a temperature that's vaporizing it, and then you're inhaling that vapor through a medium.
Inhaling and then exhaling. Don't
And
hold
I
concentrates in.
remember cup hits that we used to take back in the day where we'd heat up a little bit of hash on a knife and then we put it under a cup and we'd let that come into the cup and then we like pull the cup up just a little bit and sip it from the side. So the last thing I want to ask, and I really appreciate you taking the time to give us all this information. I mean, we talk a lot on this show about safe consumption and making sure that people are getting the effect that they want. My experience with dabs is that it can be pretty intense. It's a large amount of THC coming into the body very quickly. And that for people that are inexperienced or newer to cannabis, it may not be something they want to start out with. It may be something they want to work up to. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and in working up to it, I think a perfect way to start is the pens. The all-in-one is a great way because if you just buy a cartridge and then attach it to a battery, you don't know if that cartridge is meant for that battery. You don't know what the exact temperature of that battery, is running at. And you can, find right combinations, but I'd say for a new user, finding an all-in-one that's tried and true, that's known for having a low temperature. I think AVD, not to plug a brand that, I work with, but AVD/Active now is what they're known as, really has focused on low and slow. So their atomizers really utilize lower temperatures, which then correspond or correlate to better flavor. It's also going to be smoother. It's not going to be as hot. It's not going to hit the throat as much. So I think that all-in-one vaporizers, finding a rosin all-in-one vaporizer is a great introduction to concentrates and to taking a dab, if you will, but on a very small level. And then now you've got companies like Puffco who released a pen long ago, but just, I believe, like this week, they've re-released a new, very small handheld device that you can add your own concentrate to. So there's going to be two different methods there where you can add your own to one, and that might not be as user friendly, but that all-in-one is just, you get it out the package and some of them you don't even turn on. They turn on by just pulling. So there's no button to press, you just inhale. So I think that's a nice way to get into dabbing, and then from there get into an electronic portable rig or vaporizer, because those are going to be just a little bit more easy to control the temperature if you're not used to having a temp gun or a tool of that nature to make sure you're getting that right temperature. You can make sure you're clicking the lowest setting on one of these devices and getting a really nice low temperature smooth dab. Low temperature is going to correspond to smooth and less intense. So when you're thinking about concentrates, think about low temperature to start. And then if you really want to get high, increase temperature. Increase the size of your dab and increase the temperature is going to be your titration device.
Well, start low, go slow is definitely a mantra that we have on this show, because you can take more, but you can't take less. So Nikka T, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here. This has been super enlightening. I know we just scratched the surface of concentrates, and we could probably do a whole series just on talking about concentrates. But I think for a lot of consumers out there, especially newer consumers, there's just a demystification around what these products are, how they're made, what the difference is, how they might use one, to make sure that people have the education they need in order to get the effect that they want. So, Christina, you want to outro us?
Yeah, let's wrap it up. This concentrated episode that wasn't so concentrated in terms of time, but that's okay because I would rather get as much information out there as we can. So we hope you're feeling a little clear on what dabbing, shatter, and wax are all about. And whether you're just getting curious or you're already navigating the world of cannabis concentrates, remember, knowledge is key to a better experience. And like we all said, slow and low. And don't forget, if you've got burning questions, we're your go-to source for all things plant-powered and alternative medicine-wise. Keep exploring, keep learning, and as always, stay lifted, stay curious, and keep those questions coming. We'll see you next time.